Well, folks, we're gonna get started. I am delighted to welcome you. My name is Matt Auer. I'm the Dean of the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Georgia. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the third installment of the Johnny Isakson Symposium on Political Civility, and the first ever in Washington, D.C. I want to first thank you to Henry Turner. He's in the back. Henry, your team, they've been fabulous as always. This location on Capitol Hill is incomparable, so we're just thrilled to be here. We are here today because we believe that political civility and common sense problem solving still exist, but more broadly, that they are essential to a robust democracy. And we think that's emblematic in our speakers this afternoon. This event is made possible by the Johnny Isakson Legacy Fund. In 2023, SPIA created the Legacy Fund to honor the late senator who showed over and over that civil discourse was the cornerstone for meaningful resolution. In fact, I sincerely believe that if he were here today, I'm not sure we would still have a shutdown. In fact, the shutdown might not have happened in the first place. With that, and certainly in that spirit, we have two superb senators here who are very much in the style of Senator Isakson. I'm going to give you sort of a TikTok version of their bios because they have to go vote. So Senator Coons was first elected to the Senate in 2010, and he serves as a senior member of the Appropriations, Judiciary, Foreign Relations, Small Business, and Ethics Committees. Senator Tillis was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2014, and he currently serves as a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, the Veterans Administration, and he is also on Banking and Judiciary Committees. Respectively, these senators are representing Delaware and, of course, North Carolina. With that, I also want to introduce you to Clyde McGrady. Clyde McGrady will serve as the moderator this afternoon. He is a national correspondent for the New York Times, where he covers issues including race and identity and politics and culture. And with that, with no further ado, I'd like to ask them to come to the stage. Thank you.
You there? Hello.
Hello, friends and future friends. Let's just get straight to it. Senator Tillis, what is an issue or an approach to politics that you think the other party has figured out or is very successful at that you wish your own party would improve upon?
Let me let that germinate for a minute. Well, I'll tell you all something I told John Isakson a minute ago. You all may not know this, but Johnny Isakson was my state house representative when I lived in East Cobb at the same time that Newt Gingrich was my congressman. So I actually knew Johnny before you did. But Johnny didn't know me. I wasn't involved in politics, but I did follow politicians, particularly my elected officials, and just want to thank everybody for holding this event. It's a great tribute to Johnny. What has the other party gotten right that I wish we would have? You know, if you'd asked me that question about 10 years ago, I think I could have given you an answer. But today, I think both parties, and what I mean by that is not Chris Coons or Thom Tillis. I think both parties are getting it wrong in the context of civil discourse and debate. I mean, not Chris, I've never seen him say anything untoward. I may have said something untoward, but But I think now both parties are getting wrong what people really want out of politicians in their state houses or in their U.S. Capitol, and that's a little bit of civil discourse, mutual respect, and problem solving. And right now, neither party can claim the blue ribbon for doing that kind of work today, and it's something that's sorely missing. I do think, not the party, but if you look at people like Senator Coons and you look at some of the other members, we're every day talking about how we can get things done. It's not a priority of the parties, but it is a priority of a handful of members, and Johnny Isakson was one of the first among them. He was a great chair, by the way, in VA. But no, I think we've got a lot of work to do. We're kind of in a rebuilding time frame that really it's a challenge that created when we entered this populist era back when President Obama started and President Trump put it on steroids. So I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but right now I don't have a best practice to give you at either end of the spectrum. I doubt maybe Chris would, because he's a lot nicer person than me. I'm just a blunt redneck. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I got to thinking about how I most enjoy Johnny's company to answer this question. First, Thom, thank you. You've been a wonderful friend and partner. We're co-chairs of the Human Rights Caucus. We've worked very closely on intellectual property. We've traveled together. We've legislated together. I really wish you weren't leaving the Senate, and I will miss having you as a colleague and a partner. Johnny was my mentor when I got here. And to Diane and Kevin and Julie and John, thank you. Thank you for sharing him with all of us. He was such a blessing and such a prince of a man. Johnny was at prayer breakfast every Wednesday. And one of his first pieces of advice to me was to make the hour and be there and be present. And I was commuting from Delaware at that time. So for me to make it to 8 a.m. Wednesday prayer breakfast, I had to be out the door before 5:30 a.m. And forgive me, I will confess on more than one occasion, I'd be like, oh, Mike Lee, I'm not getting up that early. And that's exactly when I learned the most. Specifically, John Barrasso and Mike Lee. I remember rolling over and going, I don't think I should waste my time. And I took the train all the way down, and I learned amazing things about them. Because in our bipartisan prayer breakfast, and our chaplain runs it, there's no disrespect, there's no staff, there's no lobbyists, there's no media. It's just a group of, 24 senators sitting in a room. And we mostly talk about our families, what's on our hearts and minds, our childhood, how we came to faith, what role it plays in our lives, how we see the challenges in front of it. And I always learn something. So what do I think the other party does well than mine? Which is to occasionally weave into our engagement with our constituents that faith plays a role in our lives. I am a believing Christian, and I went to divinity school, yet I spent my first decade as an elected official virtually never referencing it. Now it's gotten to a point where people tease me sometimes about, oh, here comes the scripture quote. But Johnny was comfortably living out his faith. And I think if more politicians comfortably inhabited and lived out their faith, we'd all be better off. A focus on humility, on neighborliness, on engagement and respect, on seeing everyone as worthy because everyone's God's child. I mean, I don't mean a sort of proselytizing, Bible-thumping faith. I mean just a lived, generous, kind faith. And I frankly think my party's run away from ever talking about it. Joe Biden, one exception, lived it. But I think, frankly, my party would be better off if the average American looked at us and said, I don't need to know what you do, but I know that you do something that humbles you and moves you to care for others.
Thank you for that response. And I'm going to come right back to you. What is a problem that you thought would have been solved by now since you've been in Congress that has not been?
Oh, that's a long list. But every Congress or so, I come up with a bill that is so simple that every senator I talk to says, wait a minute, what? We should pass that by unanimous consent. My latest one is entitled, wait for it, Stop Taxing American Hostages. The title explains the purpose. And There was this guy named Jason Rezaian, who's a reporter for the Washington Post, was in Tehran, got rolled up by the IRGC, and spent 2 years in an Iranian prison. Okay, what's the first thing he got from the American government when he returned home? A tax bill with fines for failure to pay. And he called them up and he said, hey, what? They said, you owe blah, blah, blah. And he said, but I was in prison in Iran. Well, sir, lots of people claim that they were unable to pay due to, he said, it was on the front page of the Washington Post. They had no legal process by which they could recognize a certain subset of Americans as having been officially recognized as, right, unjustly detained. And so they waived some of the fines and fees, but some of them can only be waived by Congress. And so when Mike and I introduced this bill 3 years ago, we thought it would take 10 minutes. Yet here we are. It's passed the House, it's passed the Senate, but each time we toss it to the other with junk. That's one. I got 3 more.
I don't know if we got.
But I'll stop at that one. The Kids Online Safety Act, all of us know that social media is poisoning our kids. And it's addictive, it's destructive, and we've got a Kids Online Safety Act that has, I think, 80 co-sponsors or something, and has cleared the Senate by 91 votes. And yet we don't seem to be able to get it over the line. Protecting our kids from social media is the substantive thing I'd say. Taxing hostages is a bad thing. We shouldn't do it. But that's, you know, I think very fixable. COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, there's real reasons that it hasn't passed. It's vigorous lobbying by some of the relevant affected platforms.
I was thinking something a lot more simple, comprehensive immigration reform. And border security. I remember I served in the State House before I came up, and worked on, you know, the issues that you can at the state level. But I was just looking at this thing, guys. You know, we got a border issue we got to deal with. We got immigration issues we got to deal with. We can prevent the demographic challenge that no Western industrialized European nation has gotten right, and that's why they're shrinking and dying. And so it just seemed like a no-brainer. Yeah. And I do think it's so close that if we can, it's about planets being in alignment and everything else. But people asked me when I first came here, you know, what would I like to accomplish? And that's one of them. And I've still got 438 days, and I'm hoping that we still have a shot at it. So that is one. Because it really, if we address it in the right way, there's something for everyone, I think, to get it done. And it's something that's very important for the country. Now, on a more detailed level, I'm also very focused on trying to get the Lumbee tribe of North and South Carolina recognized, and I intend to go to the mat for that over the next, over the remainder of this Congress, and you'd be amazed at what that could entail. But that should be another easy one. But it's not, nothing's easy here, just to the point that you've made. I mean,
I've had 3 of his colleagues complain to me about how fierce he is on this Lumbee point. I was
who
like,
is
he's
a
getting your attention.
pro-taxing hostages coalition? Do we have a caucus here?
There's
I don't
about 6
think
of
so.
them.
So, I mean, that should be an easy one.
One of my first few months working for Senator Isakson was the 2007 immigration bill, and you just gave me PTSD from the flashbacks of answering those phones during that time. So you kind of alluded to this, but what is a common misconception about what makes bipartisanship difficult?
You know, I think the reality is that if you're in the party that has to deliver the margin of victory, about how much weight comes down on many members. Johnny knows that. I mean, my goodness, Johnny was there. He was a plank walker. You know, he was there to get things done. And I don't think, you know, everybody goes, oh, it's simple and straightforward policy. For a lot of people, I mean, the weight of their constituency, their support base, everybody else. There are a lot of people there that want to go and take some of these difficult votes. But I respect the fact, I grew up in a trailer park, and I like a good scrap, so I don't really give a damn about getting reelected, and now I really don't give a damn. But probably a testament to the fact of where I am today. But it's tough. I mean, it's really tough just how vitriolic and how people will come at you. So it's not so much a misconception, but probably people probably underestimate just the level of intensity that Johnny faced in the past, and other people. Just vote your constituents, vote your conscience, vote your constituents, and then if you got time, vote your conference. But I think Johnny was guided by that. That's what I was guided by, and a lot of other people want to be. But it's tough, particularly in today's world.
I think a misconception is that the barriers to bipartisanship are all based on money and donors or threats, whether from the president or the radical left. I was recently seeing television ads that suggest that the only reason the Schumer shutdown is continuing is because AOC's driving him around in a limousine. To Tom's point, where you're from and the calls you get are what really drive decisions, and some of the hardest ones. I've volunteered or worked on or been the center of a dozen campaigns in my life. And, I think we'd like to think most people are rational and scientific and data-based. No. At the end of the day, you've got a gut. And for most elected officials, there's about 10 people who really matter. It's your mom, your brother, your cousin, the guy who was your roommate when you met your wife, your first business partner, your minister. I mean, like there's a group of people where when they call, you take the call. And when they say, hey, you need to know something, you're really ticking people off. You are really messing this up. You actually listen. And then the poll justifies and explains that, or you don't believe the poll because you're getting these calls from home saying you're messing it up. Polls are just sprinkles on the donut. At the end of the day, your gut sense of what's right and wrong does drive a lot of our votes. And for many of us, the occasional vote that enrages your caucus leader or base donors or whatever is justifiable as long as you have that anchor around you, spouse and staff and family members and longtime friends who say, yeah, I get why you're doing this, I understand it. But if you're really out there on your own and everybody you know and love is telling you you're a lunatic, that's a small subset of our Senate colleagues. I'm convinced we have a few. But bipartisanship takes effort and it takes time. More than anything, it takes time together, doing positive things. In addition to the prayer breakfast, Johnny had a wonderful tradition. He had a whole group of barbecue chefs drive up from Marietta, Georgia. And when I first had the blessing of going to the heart-stopping Isakson barbecue, it was just two. Then later on, there's another pair, then another. And I mean, it is today the one time a year the entire Senate puts everything aside and comes and has a seat and eats. John's been to him last couple of years. Johnny had a simple rule: sit next to someone you don't know, get to know them better and have a conversation, enjoy the barbecue, that's it. And we've continued it. Thom and I have been co-sponsors along with Lindsay and Senator Warnock for the last 4 years. And the chef's dinner before that barbecue is a 10-pound transportation to the divine. We have no indigenous barbecue tradition in Delaware. So, and I keep trying to get the North Carolina versus Georgia barbecue wars started with a little sprinkling of Texas and maybe Memphis. But at the end of the day, spending time together, whether it's traveling overseas together, working out in the gym together, going to the prayer breakfast, having that lunch, you got to make time. And if all you do is run around and try and get on cable TV and raise more money and have more Twitter followers or whatever, you're never going to be able to work across the aisle because you got to get to know people as people, not as.
We got to look at, there's two dimensions to bipartisan. You get the signature bipartisan bills, accomplishments that you get done, but we shouldn't sell short the bipartisanship that happens every day on a transactional basis, because it's real. And if the former staffers would know that, depending upon the member, Chris was talking about this Lumbee thing, and I've got a strategy that relies on certain other people maintaining a posture that's beneficial to my strategy, and they're doing it. Didn't ask for anything. It's based on other professional courtesies. Chris and I may miss a vote because I know he's a no and I'm a yes, so why the hell should we interrupt this discussion to go counsel each other out down the street? And we'll go back. That was a moment of bipartisanship that just happened up there. I said, you're a no on these. He said, yeah, so I'm a yes. So
There you go.
they can go sort it out.
Fact check.
That stuff happens.
True. So, as two prominent members of Article 1 who've been here through a couple administrations, how has the relationship between Congress and the executive branch changed, if at all, since your time in Washington?
You want to go first or me?
I mean, look, it's steadily gotten worse over several administrations. The lack of deference, respect, engagement, lack of responsiveness to oversight, letters, questions, hearings. We serve on the Judiciary Committee. One of the things that's been good to see about Grassley and Durbin is how, even though they're different parties and they've had plenty of big fights, they've backed each other up in terms of demanding witnesses show up. The administration answers questions. I just had a classified meeting with a senior military leader to say, you guys aren't responding at all. I'm not getting anything. Like, I'm the senior Democrat on defense appropriations, and I want to help you. But when I send you a letter and send you a phone call and ask for a meeting and there's no response, I will gradually begin to interpret that negatively. And so I think that has steadily gotten worse over the 4 administrations I've been in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that what we're seeing is kind of a hockey stick climb right now with the current administration. I'm not happy finding out about firing a whole division for CDFIs. 100 people gone, effectively killing a program. That's no way to treat the Article 1 branch, even if I agree with the outcome. Not informing in advance. We saw stonewalling in the Biden administration for certain congressional oversight, sometimes shared frustration from some of our Democratic colleagues. But we really do need to reassert the Article 1 branch, and we need to, in this administration in particular, pushback is trying to be characterized as a lack of loyalty. The reality is the holds, tough oversight questions, that sort of stuff was just pro forma 20 years ago. Yeah. You just did it. Like, okay, you're going to stonewall me, I'm going to stonewall you. We'll see who's willing to pay a higher price. And I think that has measurably declined in the 10 and a half years that I've been here. And the problem is like I tell everybody, if you're intellectually honest, it's the political physics thing going in. At what point do you get a critical mass where everybody says, okay, we kind of screwed up in that administration, we kind of screwed up in this administration. At what point do we create something that has staying power that transcends administrations? And if we don't get that right pretty soon, it's going to be a very different Washington without a filibuster and a changed nation as a result. And got to work on it.
Please go easy on me here, but what do you think the media gets wrong?
Hell! How much time do we have? That can bring any pair together.
I know, it's really leading
Talk about a bipartisan response
into that one. But what do you think the media gets wrong about how Congress operates?
I think they get the relationships wrong a lot. I don't think they really understand how much we talk and how much we work together. But I was hoping you were going to go to a broader question, which is not just the usual suspects, media outlets that you would work with. But look, a part of what we're dealing with now is the amplification of issues and the crowdsourcing of protest in real time in social media. And then media is also tempted to they don't want to go after the backstory anymore. They don't have the time, nor is it really good clickbait. It's not the thing that's going to get, you trending up and being viewed as being good at your job or whatever outlet you are. I mean, it used to be just some of the drive-by social media outlets, but everybody's kind of driven by this real time. I'll give you one example to prove the point. Back when I became speaker, just to show you how little attention is being paid to digging in, with a handful, there are some exceptions, but the vast majority. When I was speaker, I was a technology guy, so I set up our website, all that other. So when I was a legislator, I became speaker. And then about 30 days into the job, I could already tell that the media, the honeymoon was over. I was the second Republican speaker since the Civil War. The honeymoon was over. Now they're just all kind of attack. So I posted on my Facebook account the post that said, friends, I just wanted to inform you of my letter of resignation. And then I created a PDF that was on my website to click on and reading my letter of resignation. Within minutes, across broadcast news, Twitter sphere, everything, Speaker Tillis submits his letter of resignation. If those people had just taken the time to click on the link, the letter read, I have resigned myself to the reality that media is so lazy now that they will have assumed that I was resigning from my speakership when all I was really doing is resigning myself to the fact that I will no longer be able to rely on truthful reporting in my remaining tenure as speaker.
That's awesome. I'd never heard that story.
And then the
That's
media,
great. I'm going to remember that one.
And then the media got pissed at me. True story. Shortly after that, my comms people took my account. It was a lot of fun.
Go figure. What was your question?
Sorry. What does the media
What's the media get wrong?
about?
Oh, right. Look, I agree. The social media platforms have algorithms that encourage and drive division, and that dynamic has taken over traditional media too. The pressure to post and to constantly update stories reduces the level of analysis, and there is perceived to be no market for good news. Earlier today, we had the most productive markup of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 6 years. 18 bills out of committee.
3 key ones for Ukraine.
Significant ones on
tracking.
Ukraine, 3 on Taiwan. And last, was it 2 weeks ago, we passed the NDAA. I had 6 bills on that. We are legislating substantively. I will get 0 coverage for any of that work. I mean, that 0. If I can get the hometown paper to give me like a little B4 column, I'll be thrilled. And the problem is, for many members, they lay off their policy staff and they hire more communication staff because that's the key to getting clicks, views, and donors. And they perceive votes. I think I'm fortunate to serve a state small enough and moderate enough that I can go home and say, here's the bills I did, here's the consequences it had, here's the way it helps us in Delaware, and folks still give me a fair shot on it. But boy, it's hard.
Yeah, but that kind of reporting, that analysis is very difficult. I mean, there are some great reporters, and I generally have a good relationship with the press corps, but the model right now, the level of competition, I was just seeing an article on the number of print papers that no longer exist as compared to a decade ago. I know that they've got a lot of stressors on it, but I firmly believe that the journalists and the media outlets that get back to real, meaningful, investigative, substantive reporting are going to be best positioned to be considered a bellwether for news after we come out of this populist era that we're in right now. Because everybody's kind of wearing a jersey of one color or another and only really reporting on the things that kind of support that team sport, with some exception. It's broad brush, but I think that's probably applies to 80% of the media that we deal with.
You teed up my next question perfectly, actually. You mentioned this populist era that we are living through, and I'm sure you're both students of history. Are there any analogs, historical analogs, that you look to understand this particularly rancorous that we are living through in America?
Well, I do. I mean, go back to, everybody knows that John Adams came behind George Washington. His vice president was Thomas Jefferson. That was the way the Electoral College worked back then. The election of 1801, the Burr incident, Hamilton getting shot by Burr, all that stuff. How's that any different than what we're dealing with today? So a part of what I'm saying is it's been that way pretty much ever since George Washington took off on Air Horse One. So I mean, one thing we need to do is go back and say it's not really that different. It's just that if, you know, we would have seen the duel between Burr and Hamilton in real time, it would have been on social media. But the things were happening back then. And the reason I say that, because sometimes I may sound fatalistic in my assessment of current day politics. But what I'm really trying to suggest is it's not fundamentally different once we started having competitive national elections, really beginning after the first term of Adams. So now, how do you fix it? And this is not one, I have a lot of people, you know, come to me and say, what are you going to do as a U.S. Senator to fix it? I said, I'm going to play a part by doing things like we're doing today. But my gosh, if we don't have the populace behind us, this is going to be a long, cold winter. It's populism. We have 3 or 4 distinct periods in our history of populism. They kind of burned themselves out. Some of it came with a leader. Some of it just came with a changing of the times. But this is one where social media and the current extremes at either end of the political spectrum could drag this out for many, many terms, unless we get the sort of leader at the national level that just basically checks the polls at the door and tries to start really leading by example, and then our population has to be able to do the same thing, because everybody plays a big role now because of the role that you can play and the way that you can be amplified to mobilize people in the social media space. But this is not something that one leader can fix. Every single person has to. Media, elected officials, up and down the line.
So I was a kid during Watergate, and it seemed to me that during the Vietnam War and the protests and riots and such, that it felt like the country was coming apart. And different people from different backgrounds and parties had trouble respecting each other, hearing each other, seeing each other. Veterans who'd fought bravely in Vietnam came back and were called baby killers or spit on, and people were either refusing to serve and burning their draft cards, or serving with conviction and coming home and discovering the country didn't support them. And some of the long-standing divisions in our country were really boiling up and coming to the center. Our country has not felt that divided, to me, since then until now. Where it was hard for families to get together for Thanksgiving, it's dividing some churches, some companies, some communities. Forgive the reference, but Johnny and I were in Nigeria, and we were meeting with a group of parliamentarians, legislators in Abuja. And we were just chatting with them about how they get along and how they compromise and how they don't. And after a while, one of them said, well, you can't expect us to get along. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, you're probably unfamiliar with this, but we had a terrible, brutal civil war here about 50 years ago, the Biafra War, in which several million people died. And that guy is whatever, Igbo, and I'm Yoruba, and they were on that side, and I was on this side. And we just sort of sat there and looked at each other. Then it was referenced several times. And I said, well, I've got a secret to tell you. Johnny Isakson's from Atlanta, Georgia. And my great-great-grandfather was one of Sherman's colonels. That was a brutal and bitter civil war. And for the first 50 years after that war, I bet you he and I couldn't have even been friends, probably wouldn't have even shook hands, probably wouldn't have spoken to each other. It's been 150 years, and we are best friends. He is my best friend in the Senate. And we don't need to spend time talking about it. But in small and reasonable and regular ways, we each show that we respect and admire and care about the other's family and community. And we have genuinely healed those wounds. So don't give up on yourselves. A mature democracy takes a long time. And there is no deeper wound than a civil war. There is no deeper wound. And the atrocities of our American Civil War were just breathtaking. And we have not been as divided in my lifetime since the 70s, but there are things bubbling up and moving that worry me that we're headed in a much darker direction. And I'm trying to do everything I possibly can to encourage folks who I work with and who listen to me to recognize, to Thom's point, we all have a role to play. When I talk to donors, and I do too much of that because I am running for re-election, to my own regret.
Gosh, I missed that.
Yeah. When I'm talking with a group of donors and they say, how can we fix division in our country? I say, I have a real simple test for you. The next time someone asks you for money, ask them to name their 3 friends in the other party. And then ask them the names of their friends' spouses and children. And then ask them if they've had dinner together. And if they can't answer yes, tell them you won't give to them. Because you're fueling extremism.
It'll save you a hell of a lot of money.
Simple test.
Thank you for those wonderful answers. I wasn't planning on asking this question, but I'd be remiss because you both, gone back to social media. You brought up social media several times here. And as, politicians who have to be highly attuned to what their constituents are thinking or how their constituents are expressing their views, I mean, how do you navigate that, understanding where an issue's salience is with so much a noise out there with all these growing media environments?
Don't read the comments on Facebook. It's hard. The folks who work for me, are clearly different generational strata. Most of the comms folks are in their early 20s. My gut instinct is that the only people that really matter are people who vote, and my gut obsession is that people don't start voting until they're 50. I'm wrong. But my intuitive feeling is I care about who writes me a letter and who makes a phone call, not who posts on, Instagram, not who signs an online petition. Now, the younger generation in my office sees it the other way. They pay no attention really to who writes me a letter and who makes a phone call. They're very concerned about, who's in different chat rooms and saying what about me on Insta. And I recognize that different generations communicate in different ways, and I have tried to become less out of touch. I will give Thom huge credit for being the most AI-enabled member of the Senate, and I'm embarking on an AI training program for my team. One of the challenges is to sift from all the noise an actual meaningful message, and part of that to me is having a whole group of trusted people who I've known for 20 or 30 years in Delaware, in different communities, doing different functions and in different parts of my state, who I just check in with and talk to and listen to. I also have the exact same cell phone number that I've had for 25 years. And you never really know how broadly that number has disseminated until people really need you. And in the first month of the pandemic, it rang over and over and over as small businessmen called and said, I can't believe you answered your phone. I've had this number tucked in my wallet for 15 years since you came to my ribbon cutting of my soup place. I can't figure out how I'm going to make payroll. Can you help? And that was the most productive and positive month of my service because I felt like I was making a difference. If I had listened to my chief of staff and changed my number, they never would have gotten me. And so how do you discern? At the end of the day, I think making it possible for people to connect with you without having to make a donation, without having to be connected, and finding ways to be in spaces where they don't expect to see you, at football games or at church festivals, and just walking around. If people are happy with what you're doing, they'll leave you alone. If they're unhappy, they'll find you. And you have to have systems that allow you to get information through, that gets around the usual hierarchy?
I use a burner phone. No, I'm kidding. I've had a number for a long time, too. You know, one thing that I've tried to do for the staff, I really do believe that many of my young, I've worked in technology my entire career, and I worked in AI back in the late 80s, or mid 80s, actually, before I moved to Georgia, at Wang Laboratories up in Boston. So I love technology, can't get enough of it. I've tried to figure out how we can use AI to really synthesize all this garbage in our social media feeds so that the young people do not, I don't place any emphasis on social media platforms. If you don't write a letter, initiate a conversation, you're a 140 character comment as far as I'm concerned. But I do think it would be helpful to be able to aggregate it in a more meaningful way that these large language models can help with. And we're trying to work on that. So my staff can say, look, I don't care about anyone comment. And you can get trending. But now that you could ingest some of the specific comments and try and make sense out of what really do appear to be legitimate posts versus bots or get out the message initiatives, that's the way that I hope that we can kind of synthesize and determine whether or not there's anything valuable coming from our social media feeds. I don't actively, after that letter of resignation thing, I've done a lot less posting myself. I think it's important, but it's more trending analysis, point-in-time surveys, and I think too many people have become slaves to it and think that, you know, if they don't get their like or retweet, repost up, then they got to focus on doing that. It's the last thing that I'm concerned with as a U.S. Senator.
All right. Well, I think that does it for questions. Thank you so much. Did you have a...
Can I just make a brief closing statement,
yes,
if you don't mind?
absolutely.
Again, I wanted to thank the University of Georgia. I wanted to thank the Isakson family. And I wanted to thank all of you for coming today. Just the fact that you invested your time here today means you care about civility in political discourse. Johnny was beloved in the U.S. Senate by Democrats and Republicans alike, because even if you disagreed with him, he was never disagreeable. And I have framed in my office in the central point, you can't miss it when you walk in, just a little handwritten note from him about life is about friends and future friends, which is an attitude of the heart that says, even if I'm opposed to you today, even if I vote the opposite of you today, I recognize you as someone who is worth my engagement and with whom I may someday be friends. So thank you, friends. Thank you, Isaksons, and thank you, University of Georgia. Thank you all.
Senator Coons, Senator Tillis, thank you for being here. Thank you for your friendship, not just with Dad, but with all of us as a family. With him being gone, it's nice to have reminders of who he was and who his friends were, and it's very touching to be here, and it's very powerful for you to tell the stories you told. So thank you both. I know you both have a vote to get to, so thank you for being here. Senator Coons referred to the Isakson barbecue that Dad started however many years ago, and he referred to the invitation that I was given, and Dad was too sick and couldn't make it, and so Senator Coons was real kind. He said, why don't you come up and speak instead? And I thought, this is an amazing opportunity. This is incredible. What am I going to say? And I said, well, I know exactly what to say. I went and asked my father what to say. And even though he was sick and even though he wasn't at his best, he had some great advice about where the world was and what was important and what needed to be said. And so I had my notes and I had everything together, and Chris Coons stood up and he said, "I'd like to welcome John Isakson in place of his father." And I stood up, got in front of the senators, and I can assure you it was not the barbecue that gave me a heart attack. That's by far the most intimidating room I've ever been in, and I don't think I remember a word that I spoke. But one of the things that struck me when I was talking to Dad was how passionate he was about the people that he served with. And it wasn't about Republican and Democrat, it was about who they were. And when we heard Senator Tillis and when we heard Senator Coons talking about each other and talking about their colleagues, they weren't talking about Republicans and Democrats. They were just talking about their friends. And they were talking about the people who are up here working hard to serve their country. And I know we have some other representatives that we did in the room here a little while ago. And you know, one of those very old friends of Dad's is Austin Scott. And you know, Austin, I think, has known my dad as long as anybody has. He says he was like 16 years old. And as I got to know Austin, he became much less Congressman Austin Scott, and he very much became my friend Austin Scott. And what I've realized since Dad has passed is that that is the case with many of them. And it doesn't matter if it's Chris Coons or if it's whichever senator or whichever representative. These are just people. And these are our leaders. And these are people that we should, and I think we want to respect. And today, in the partisan environment